Chapter 67. Blue. It's odd not waking up in a rush. Master's usually up well before me, and he's such a light sleeper that even when I do wake up before him, he's usually awake before I can so much as make my way to the edge of the bed. He's not here today. The covers on his side of the bed remain disturbed from when he left, but it's long since grown cold. Usually today is an early day, but the thought only serves to remind me of the mess my master and I are in. Oh, right. Suspension. My mind chimes in late, but just in time for the rolling guilt to strike me so forcefully that I'm immediately left breathless. Perhaps it's weak of me, but I feel the urge to roll right back over and go back to sleep. That beautiful, numb place where the outside world isn't a factor and I can go back to the blissful ignorance of a minute ago, when the only thing that bothered me was the fact that my master wasn't still in bed with me. Master was so busy asking if I was all right and checking me over for any additional bruises on the way home that I couldn't get in a single question. The second he saw the small bruise starting to form on my face, he started fussing over me like he had after the disaster of our first casting. He'd made me tell him everything they'd done, every question they'd asked. His concern was touching, but I was more curious about what they'd done with him. I had no idea what was going on when I was in the little holding room, and I had waited there a long time. But he just shoved food in my face and helped me wash up, and then we were just tumbling into bed. We were so exhausted. I never got the chance to talk to him about what happened to him. I pressed my face into the pillow and count to 10, tracing the shapes of the numbers in the bedsheet. Today would have been an early day that somehow always manages to catch us by surprise. Kara usually shoves a quick breakfast in my mouth as we run out the door and nearly sprint the entire way to school. We have 3 long classes, but only the last 2 of them are in quick succession. Kara would come back to the care center after the first class, smelling like whatever Professor Bald had his students working with. We'd talk, eat together, and just burn time until his next class. He's taken me all around campus, from the dueling courts to the stables. He's even snuck me into the greenhouse a few times, careful to avoid Professor Linnell's gaze. I frown at that. I thought she hated familiars, or at least only saw their use in passing as a magic practitioner like Berg. I've never seen her with one. Of course her magics don't require the type of mana draws that would necessitate a familiar. If she found them to be distasteful, then she really wouldn't need to keep one around. But she was kind. My mind completes the thought automatically, and as much as I don't want to think about it, the problem sits before me, unchained in the face of my unwillingness. My act was good, but it doesn't change her nature. You can be a pathetic, simpering creature all you want, but pity and leniency exist at the whims of the other person in the room. If she hated familiars, she could have let her guard toss me around. I know I'm not the sturdiest, but I've been better fed and kept in the past months than most of my life. I could take a little beating. But she'd called him off. Her questions came without harshness, and never once did she use rougher methods than a raised eyebrow and disbelieving inflection at my words. She actually seemed disturbed by the simpering act the longer it continued. She didn't seem to like to see me afraid of her. The guard was sent away after a short round of questions, but instead of some kind of painful channeling or some other method of divining the truth, she got down on the floor with me and continued asking her questions. The questions were odd. She didn't ask anything about the casting more than once, but she'd started to ask about Kara. Not about his magic, not about anything of consequence, really. She started asking me about our schedule, what kind of things he required of me, if I was allowed enough rest or food, if I was ever left unsupervised. I tried my best to give the answers from the book. My third master, Master Trainer, he liked to read from the training book aloud so that I could understand what we would be working on. Sometimes we'd work on single passages for days. The words are still burned into my mind like a recitation. It wasn't too hard to give the right answers. My hand stills beside me as I realize that I've made the last line for 10. Numbers that have shape now because of my current master, the one I should be focusing on, the one I've gotten into trouble. Yet again. I want to stay in bed more than ever now. I'd thought that just a few seconds of wallowing might get it out of my system, but remembering all the events of the past day is just leaving me with a bad taste in my mouth. I want to stay here, where it's warm and I can pretend that nothing's wrong. I have my master's calming scent, and with that, the reassuring knowledge that he will eventually return. It's an entertaining thought, but I push myself out of bed, forcing my legs to take my weight even though my whole body is sluggish and reluctant to do so. I gave myself exactly 10 and no more. I let myself fumble with my clothes, trying to piece together something that approximates respectable, even though we probably aren't going to be leaving today. It doesn't do to be sloppy, some part of my mind chimes in. The bright tone is far too chipper for me, but I try not to scowl at the voices in my own head. The tired, stuffy feeling is probably just something residual from either the casting yesterday or the potion I took before it. I'm probably just dehydrated. The inside of my mouth feels sticky, and there's something wrong with my head that's still a shade too light to be called painful. I wander downstairs, stepping lightly, even though I know it doesn't do me any good. The bell on my collar insists on announcing my presence, and in this empty house, the sound carries unnaturally well. Usually, I like it. When I enter rooms, Master already knows I'm on my way, and most of the time that means a smile, if nothing else, is sent in my direction. But now, Kara's in the kitchen. It shouldn't be surprising, but when I turn down the hall, I see him sitting at the table, just sipping a cup of tea. There's no way he hasn't heard me, but perhaps he's just deep in thought. At least, I hope he is. Otherwise, he's staring a little too intently at nothing. "Master? Are you all right?" I speak quietly, just short of an arm's breadth away from him. He doesn't deserve the caution, but even after I move to force noise from my little bell, he still isn't acknowledging my presence. "Yeah, I'm fine." His voice is far away for a moment before he blinks and seems to come back into his body, startled by my presence. "Are you doing all right?" he asks, smile tight in a way that makes me wonder if it hurts. "I'm all right. You didn't have to. You could have woken me up," I offer, reiterating a point that I've made countless times already. "Nah, I was just restless," he replies, brow creased as he seems to be fighting with that distant, vacant look that had possessed him earlier. Restless, I believe. There's mixing bowls and towels strewn about the kitchen. A singular, clean countertop still has a sponge resting on top of it. There's a pile of baking dishes left in the corner and a cooling rack that's set up despite not currently being in use. The sink's not much better, half full of dirtied bowls. He's usually not this messy, but in the past few days I've seen him using magic to do relatively simple things like getting glasses from high shelves and stirring batter. It's odd. He's not the type to use lazy magic. But when I ask, he always gives me the excuse that he's trying to learn to be more precise with his magic. Either way, it's fairly obvious that the floury mess in the kitchen was a result of one such experiment. I don't know when he left the bed, but it's longer than I thought if it's enough to have the kitchen cluttered up like this. I do believe he's restless, no matter how dodgy he's being about the root cause. He's probably furious with me. There are few things that Master attacks with the single-mindedness that he uses for school. It is not a great mystery that he loves it, and because of our action, he's in trouble. Are you all right? I wasn't sure what the school said to you. I stumble, searching for a way to make him feel better, but he cuts me off.
They just yelled at me, Blue. They'll make me do some stuff for them, but you don't have to worry about it. We were in the right, and they know it. They're just frustrated.
He rolls his eyes as his lips pull into a smirk. I'm not sure that's true. At least, not all of it. Are we in the right? Familiars shouldn't be able to control magic. That's dangerous, and it can hurt our masters. Maybe it would be better if we just went back to the old style of casting. I'm being too selfish, wanting to stay with my master even though it might hurt him.
It's better to take what they're giving now and let that frustration out before it begins to cool and fester while they have time to think about it. This annoyance is a flash in a pan for them. If I fought, then they'd stew in it for weeks until they found some kind of technicality to trap me in.
He shrugs, as though the line of thought is obvious. The problem is that it is. Usually, when he tries to explain himself to me, I'm certain that we're speaking different languages. But what he said now, it's so close to my own thinking that it scares me. He shouldn't have to think like that, calculating how to draw as little effect from the amount of ire directed at him as possible. There's a knock on the door before I find the words I need to explain my thoughts. Master only quirks his brows in confusion before he goes to see who's at the door.
Oh, Shauna! Ande, I wasn't expecting you to.
He smiles, looking between the two. His voice sounds happy, if a bit confused. Hell, I'm confused as to why they've stopped by.
Well, you should be grateful I wasn't waiting for you when you got home yesterday.
Shauna huffs, crossing her arms and turning up her nose as though this whole interaction is something entirely unpleasant that she has to suffer through, rather than something she instigated herself. My master only quirks a brow at her display before turning to her familiar.
Thank you, Ande,
he says, even going so far as to bow his head just slightly in acknowledgement. The whole thing is far too much for Ande. His expression doesn't change, but his face colors brightly under direct attention.
Hey, I could have made that choice.
Shauna pouts, waving her arms in a dismissive gesture, but her voice is just a shade too loud to convince anyone of her professed level-headedness.
Come on, Shauna, you hothead. You want me to believe that you thought up giving me space all on your own?
He prods, but opens the door in a clear invitation.
You know, the Scorched Fields exist because people like you taunt fire-aligned mages like me.
She huffs dramatically, but steps into the house with Ande.
Point taken. May I ply the resident firebug with sweets in the hopes that she will not rain down fire from the skies?
My master asks, voice candied with fake innocence.
Don't call her firebug, and you just might get away with it.
Shauna rolls her eyes and motions for Ande to follow her inside. Kara gives them a second to shed their winter layers before he leads them the short and familiar path back to the kitchen.
They're almost done. I'll get you some tea.
He says the words like they're simply habit. The tiredness at the edge of his voice is not lost on me. Nor Shauna, apparently.
How about you let Blue and Ande do that so you can explain to me just what the fuck I saw in class yesterday?
She says, her casual tone doing nothing to stop the bluntness of her words. I can't help the way I flinch. I had hoped the idea of Kara's sweets had distracted her, at least to the point where she'd wait until after she'd received them to start asking questions. I can see the muscles in Kara's body tense at her words. And though I want to say something, to intervene, I can't even begin to come up with the right words.
You know, Shauna, subtlety is a dying art.
Kara's voice has none of its previous levity. It's just the tired, deadened tone of someone who wants out of a situation.
Tell me before I squash subtlety into the dirt.
She huffs, finding an unoccupied spot at the table to sit at. I see Kara cringe. The house isn't up to its usual standards, and the kitchen is particularly messy. The table still has a wide cutting board and a floured rolling pin that Kara tries his best to pick up and dump in the sink without drawing too much attention to the action. The flour actually makes an outline of where the board was. Kara's hands twitch before they leave the wash rag where it is, and he joins Shauna at the table.
Right, well, it's really not that crazy. It all just started as an experiment. Remember when I borrowed your potion?
He starts explaining, going into a level of detail that I don't understand. There are terms peppered in that I've only heard from lecturers at the academy. I assume it's something that is very specific in how it relates to magic. Either way, it might as well be gibberish for all the sense it makes to me. I stop listening. After all, I've got actual things to do now. Shauna set me and Ande on a task. There's some part of me that wants to protest. She's a guest in my master's home. She shouldn't really be allowed to give orders like that. Still, it's the closest thing to an order I've got, and it's not like it directly contradicts any of my master's orders. Not that there's a lot of them. I turn to take out a set of cups and the larger teapot that's usually reserved for when we have guests. Ande is standing there, useless. It takes me a second to realize he's sniffing at the door to the oven like it's a safe he can crack. Ande, they aren't done yet, I inform him. It's not like it's some grand revelation, but he nods gravely as though this information is incredibly important. The smell is pretty enticing, though I try not to let my mind linger on what exactly my master was up cooking at the crack of dawn. Ande only looks longingly at the oven for another moment before he turns back to me and remembers he can speak.
Yes, Do you want some help?
He stumbles sheepishly over his words, then utilizes that extra height to pull down the cup that I'd been struggling with. There's not much skill needed to prepare tea, but I can see he needs something to do while his master is engaged. As he cannot shove pastries into his face at this very moment, he needs something else. If you could fetch the tray and the cups on the high shelf. I point at the rest of the matching set. Ande gets to it right away, pulling the last 2 cups and the tray from the shelf while I set water to boil. I don't really know what to do after that. I feel idle, and I've never been good at handling that. Ande seems to be feeling the idleness too. His ear gives a twitch as he tries to find new ways to arrange 4 mugs and a teapot on a tray. At least he's got something to do with his hands. I glance over at our masters. They're engaged, chatting animatedly about stars know what. I still swear it's a different language. They wouldn't notice if I wasn't here. The pantry is only a few steps away. I need to pick up tea anyway. I move casually, though by the time I've gotten to the pantry, I don't know why I bothered. They don't seem to notice my strategic retreat. I slide to my knees and let my head fall into my hands as I try to pull myself together. I haven't even been up for an hour. I should be more capable than this.
Are you all right?
I jump at the sound of Ande's voice. He asks it so casually, but I'm startled enough that he's speaking without having the conversation pulled out of him with a pry bar. I'm fine. What are you... I don't get to finish speaking before Ande pulls himself into the tiny pantry with me and closes the door. The pantry isn't large. We'd be brushing against each other if both of us were standing, but the uncomfortable space doesn't seem to bother him. He slides down onto the floor in front of me, and as he sits, I find myself mirroring his posture. The oddly casual position has our legs interlocked even as we lean into opposite sides of the shelving units. It's a small space, but it's unexpectedly cozy.
The magic that we saw yesterday, it was intense. And after last time...
He stops for a long moment, examining a jar of preserved fruit that's brushing his ankle with far more focus than the activity deserves.
I was worried for you.
He eventually finishes, voice soft like he's sharing a secret.
Oh,
I respond. It's all I can manage. I hadn't thought of that. For some reason, the concept of being missed, of being mourned if something bad were to happen to me, had never occurred before, especially here where I was the only familiar serving my master. I wonder idly if any of the pets I'd served with missed me, if they still remember me after so much time.
But I see now that you're fine. Better than last time.
He finishes quickly, though his eyes narrow as though he's looking for some flaw that will disprove his assertion. I am much better than last time, excepting the trouble my master's in. There's no soreness, and after a long night's rest, most of the residual exhaustion has cleared itself from my system. I get why he's skeptical. Nobody goes from being as useless a familiar as I was to not suffering any ill effects from casting. At least, they aren't supposed to.
yeah.
I push the word out, though I can't make myself say much more. It's odd being the monosyllabic one when Ande is my conversational partner. I pull a scuffed tin from the second shelf and simply hold it, willing myself to do anything useful, but I just continue to sit there, clutching it to my chest like it will protect me from this uncomfortable line of questioning. The tin is what I came in here for. It's my master's favorite tea instead of one of the other blends that he uses when guests come over. He deserves the tea he likes best.
Was it hard?
Ande asks. There's no inflection, no judgment in his voice, but I still stumble.
What?
I ask, pulling in on myself the fraction that I can in this enclosed space.
Was it hard?
He repeats in that stars-damned, permanently calm voice of his.
No, I heard you.
I try not to snap.
I suppose not. It was really easy with that potion that your mistress made. Why do you ask?
Well, it's what my mistress is asking of your master.
He says it like it's obvious, but my brain can't make sense of it. She's asking Kara? For what? It's her potion. There's nothing that she should have to ask him for. Perhaps the answer lies in all that magic jargon that they were spouting. Maybe she wants some answers as to some of the specifics of her potion. I know I should just leave it be. My master will handle it, and I won't have to worry about it. But the question is out of my mouth before I can convince myself to let it go.
What? Why is she asking Kara?
I blurt out before I snap my mouth closed as my cheeks begin to burn. It's not really my place. I shouldn't worry about it. It's something that's going down between our two masters, and it doesn't really have to involve us. Ante is just staring at me with wide eyes like I've grown a second head. I'm about to ask him if I have before I realize why he's watching me like I'm some alien life form. Fuck! I can't believe I've said his name aloud again. The first time it had been an order. I had to comply. It was an order, straight from my master's mouth. But now? He wasn't even around to see it. It's such a casual level of disrespect that my stomach turns as I try not to think about all the potential repercussions. As I try not to think about all the punishments I've suffered in the past from masters who have caught me in this exact scenario. It didn't happen many times, and certainly never after Master Trainer, but I still shudder at the faraway memories. This isn't the name game. Ande isn't here to trick me and then rat me out to our master. We have two different masters. We only get to interact because our masters are friends. It has nothing to do with testing our loyalty and training. I feel like I'm drowning, but Ande is answering before I can lose myself entirely to the memories. There's a nudge at my thigh as Ande taps me with his toe, saving me from going down that line of thought. I'm not there. I'm here, in a slightly over-capacity pantry with my friend. Ande gives me a little smile, Something that would seem insignificant for most, but on his stoic face, it speaks volumes. I have no choice but to return it as Ande barrels ahead with the conversation as though there was no interruption.
She's asking for you to teach me, just as she is going to learn from him. The magic that he used was stronger, more effective, and has less of an adverse effect on the familiar. I imagine she wants me in working condition faster than I was capable of last time,"
he explains. Or she just doesn't want to hurt you. It takes unexpected force not to let those words tumble out of my mouth. I don't know why I hadn't considered it before. Kara can teach her anything about how to control magic from his side of things, but the familiar is very important in Master's style of casting. She'd need someone to help her familiar learn the new style. I think about it. It's not hard, but it might not be as easy a transition for Ande. He's big, bulky, and has a natural instinct to plant himself. He's built to be sturdy, and his training seems to have further developed those traits. It was an easy transition for me, but for him... The way that magic moves is so entirely antithetical to how Ande lives. I can't help but wonder if it will work for him. I suppose it's not my choice. It all depends on whether Kara wants me working with him or not. Perhaps it would be better if I just worked with him on some dance drills, something to get him to loosen up. It might make it easier for him to move the way he needs to when the time comes. Either way, I can worry about all that later. The kettle whistles, and I startle so badly that my foot almost goes through Ande's chest. It takes more time than I'd like to untangle ourselves and get out of the pantry. By the time I make it back to the stove, I know there's no way both our masters are still ignorant to our absence. But as I pour the water and sprinkle the tea into the strainer, no one seems to be upset that we were gone, though the pastries have been taken out of the oven and are cooling on the wire grate now. "Master, the tea is ready," I call, bringing the tray over to the table. Whatever they were talking about gets put on hold as I pour tea into their mugs and pass them around. "Thank you, Blue—" "Wait!" Master cries, his eyes widening as his hand shoots out in Shauna's direction. I flinch at the loud sound, looking between the two as I try to steady the teapot with my other hand. I don't see anything wrong, but then I wasn't paying much attention.
"Stars! Kara, you're going to give me a heart attack! What the hell?"
She jerks back, almost spilling the tea on herself.
"Just don't drink that,"
he stutters for a second. I see his hand shake before he stands and balls his hands into fists at his side.
"Why?"
Shauna questions, looking Kara over like he's gone crazy. I have to admit, I don't understand exactly what transpired here to make Kara look so worried. But then he blinks, and the fear is gone from his eyes like it was never there in the first place.
"I saw a bug land in your cup. Sorry, I got startled. Here."
He takes her cup and pours it out, grabbing the rosehip and cinnamon tea that she seems to favor. He heats the water in an instant with his magic and hands over the new cup. He settles into his seat with a huff that almost sounds like a laugh.
"I'm sorry. I just got startled. Stars, I am tired."
He chuckles, a lazy grin spreading over his face like it's natural. He says it with such sincerity, but it sounds just as fake to my ears. But then he drinks from his own cup, the same tea as always, and my ears give confused little twitches as I try to stop myself from thinking about why exactly this happened. Ande drinks from his mug and nothing happens, except that he manages to look even more excited by the prospect of pastries in his imminent future. I look down at the dark liquid in my own cup. It's the same blend that Kara drinks almost every day. It smells the same, and as I bring the cup to my lips, it's the same heavy herbal flavor that's cut by the barest traces of citrus.
"It's fine, Kara. I don't want to be drinking bug tea either."
Shauna laughs it off, and the jovial atmosphere returns to the table.
So, what do you think?
she asks, once we've got our sweetbread rolls and spice cakes in front of us, and Ande is trying valiantly not to scarf everything down like a wild animal.
Can Blue tutor?
My ears flick up at the mention of my name. Did they not come to a decision about that yet?
Well, Blue?
Master turns to address me.
Do you feel all right trying to give Ande some pointers on casting as we've been practicing it?
I open my mouth to speak, but the words immediately catch in my throat. Would there be a problem if I helped Ande? The school was so mad at Kara. I know he said that we were in the right, that there was nothing they could do, but what if he's wrong? They may be willing to let this go as a one-time thing, just some terrible idea that some first year wanted to try out during the allowed experimental assignment. But if we spread this around, if more people started to use this style... I don't want to get you in any more trouble. I say the words into my cup, disappointed by how weak they sound. Ande's ears twitch as he turns to me, the confusion in his eyes speaking volumes. I want to help him. I really do, especially if I'm right and Shauna just wants to make sure that he doesn't get hurt. But I also want to see my master safe. I can't be the reason more trouble comes down on his head.
Oh, like they aren't just as busy trying to crack the powerhouse that you guys have unleashed.
Shauna waves her hand dismissively as though there's no real threat.
The only difference is that I went to the source for tips. What are they going to do? Your style of casting is far more powerful. Everyone recognizes that. There are going to be all manner of copycats until they figure out how to replicate what you've done. Everyone capable of doing it will be casting that way. Do you really think they can kick so many noble families out of their school? The heads of those houses would drive the school into the ground just at the thought of the disrespect.
Though her blasé tone is somewhat disheartening, I can't argue with her thought process. They can't get mad at everyone. And if more socially influential students start to pick it up, there's a serious limitation to what the school can do in response.
As much as it is powerful, it's still pretty dangerous,
my master chimes in.
There's a bit of a learning curve with your familiar. It's not impossible to get hurt. You have to trust your familiar. You have to make sure that they wouldn't try to take advantage of those kinds of things.
My face feels like it's on fire as I try not to squirm in my seat. It hadn't been intentional, but still, I want to apologize again. If he actually is mad at me for burning him, it wouldn't surprise me. But he's stayed silent about the incident so far. I'd thought we were past it.
I trust Ande with everything.
She says it so flatly that I have to force myself not to stare. She says it with the bland disinterest of the third-year TA that subbed in last week, as though the question itself was too stupid to merit the effort of an answer. I look over at Ande. He's the flustered mess that I was expecting, unable to keep himself from squirming in his seat as his face goes a truly impressive shade of red. He's mouthing words that he seems unable to speak aloud as he wrings his hands in a nervous gesture.
My mistress is my life. I would never hurt her.
It's nice, and somewhat reassuring to know that he holds her in such high regard. I don't mind trying, I offer, but the style of casting... Ande might benefit from learning a thing or two about dance. Just the ranges of movement, learning how to move and shift weight easily.
Well then, I leave him in your care.
Shauna nods to me, and I can't help but feel a little prideful. It has been some time since I was in charge of training someone else.
Actually, Shauna, I think it might be better if I leave Blue in yours,
my master counters, and I feel my stomach drop.
What? Master, what are you saying?
I stutter, trying not to betray the deep, wounded feeling that's left in my chest. I don't want to leave. I don't want to be sold. Shauna seems nice, but I don't want a new master.
I mean just for the next week of school. I'm suspended, but Blue isn't. He's just gotten permission to work in a nice dance studio, and he has all the papers. There's nothing that says he can't go to the school, just that I can't be on campus while the disciplinary committee reviews my case. If you get Ande a pass to move between buildings, then they could train together in the studio, Master explains.
He looks directly at me as he explains, though most of his words might be for Shauna. I try not to think of how easily I thought he would take the opportunity to get rid of me, or how easily he put me back at ease. "I'm scared you're mad at me," I scream in my mind. I want reassurance, but I know that I shouldn't be so whiny. He's still keeping me. He could have gotten rid of me at any point, but he's still keeping me. He hasn't so much as raised an angry hand to me, even though I got him kicked out of school.
You have a good point.
Shauna taps her finger to her chin, considering for a moment before she turns back to me.
Blue?
Yes, I answer, trying not to cringe at the break in my voice. It's odd to be on the receiving end of so much attention from two different owners, at least without hostilities involved.
Would this be very hard training?
She asks, and the question catches me off guard. I don't want to lie to her. Usually people think that dancing is some frivolous throwaway skill, something that can be taken lightly because it isn't too hard. But the truth is that it takes years to master the most basic movements, to make the elegant, graceful steps look as though they're coming naturally. It takes more practice, more muscle than most people would believe.
It can be. I won't lie to you, dance can force you to exert yourself more than many people think. It's hard work, but it is well worth it.
I try to give her a truthful answer. Ande isn't going to a training facility. I'm teaching him some basic things. It's not going to be years of work, but it still might be hard for him.
Ande is still pretty under the weather with the winter, so I entrust him to you, but I ask that you don't let him overexert himself, she says.
Ande stiffens at my side. He looks like he wants to say something, but he just chews on his lip instead, seemingly distracted by trying to find a place to direct his gaze.
I think I can manage that,
I accept, nodding along with her terms.
Excellent. Then I'm going to pack some of this stuff for lunch, and you guys can go have fun,
Master says as he gets out of his chair and pulls a few things out of the icebox. Maybe I should not have agreed to this so readily. Master doesn't seem offended by it, and surely he'd have said something to his friend if he truly didn't want me to go. But I can't shake the idea that I shouldn't have agreed to go and just leave him home alone.
Master, are you going to, did you need me here?
I try to ask, but Master just waves a dismissive hand.
Don't worry about me. I'm just going to be doing some work around the house,
he answers, taking a moment to look around at the mess that's still in the kitchen. It's odd riding in Shauna's carriage without my master. It's even weirder watching him wave us off from the door. There's some pain in my chest that I can't identify, something that makes this whole experience feel wrong. I know I haven't been sold. At the very most, I've been borrowed for a few hours. But I can't shake the uncomfortable feeling that comes with being driven away from the house. Shauna drops me off at the gym and gets Ande his papers in no time. Idly, I note that they give her significantly less trouble with the whole process than they gave my master. I wonder if it's because she is of higher rank, or if they think her familiar is less liable to cause trouble. I lead Ande through a warm-up. The smirk on his face slowly disappears as he realizes that I wasn't kidding about dance being a lot more intense than people usually think. You probably didn't even think there would be any cardio, did you? I bask in the momentary satisfaction of his concern before I adjust the regimen a little. I need him to respect the intensity, but I'm not trying to hurt him. Unsurprisingly, he's pretty tight. When I try to take him through a set of stretches, he's immediately whining about the pull in his muscles, complaining that his body can't move the way I'm trying to force it. I almost agree. He's not built to move this way, and he's certainly never tried to work on building up these muscles, but he isn't incapable. Ande tires quickly, both because of his condition and the unexpected intensity of our work. We break early, as I fully intend to keep my promise to Shauna. The room isn't perfectly comfortable, but I make a small pillow out of my coat and let him curl up in his own oversized coat, like it's a blanket. I settle down next to him with my back against the wall. As much as I hate to admit it, I am feeling the strain of the workout just as much as he is. It's been a long time since I practiced. I pull my primer out of my bag. I haven't worked too much on it in the last few days, but I intend to make up for that. I've been finding it easier to go through the smaller books that Master provides me with. I'm even getting a little faster with my larger book, too, but my handwriting is still lagging behind. I work in silence for a few minutes before Ande starts speaking.
They say it won't clear up until after candle lights,
he rasps, sounding so much more exhausted than he did just a few minutes ago when he'd asked for the break.
Stars, I feel so useless like this,
he whispers, nuzzling further into the makeshift pillow. Don't say that. It's just your biology. I try to reassure him just as much as I try to make my heart stop hammering. I had thought he was asleep. Nothing you could do.
I'm tired all the time, but it feels like all I do is sleep. I eat more than I should, but I'm still hungry. It's a mess,
he whines, and he does look like the very picture of misery when he squirms in his oversized coat and locks his sorrowful eyes with mine. From what I've heard, what he's describing isn't that uncommon. In fact, I'd hazard to call it entirely natural. I pull out one of Master's pastries and hold it in front of his face. Here you go, I offer, holding the spice cake close enough that all he has to do is lean forward to get the treat.
I'm going to get fat,
he huffs, the defeat clear in his voice as he leans forward to nibble on the pastry.
Mistress won't like me if I get fat.
Your mistress is crazy about you. You could go back to her bright green and she wouldn't care. I deadpan. Ande simply blushes.
There is much that my mistress accepts of me that I do not understand,
he says, furrowing his brows as if he's seeing a problem that I cannot. What do you mean? I ask, fetching another sweet from my bag.
She saw me through my rut,
he says in a quiet voice, and I gape openly. She what? I ask stupidly. I know what I heard, and yet I still don't believe it.
She saw the date marked on my papers and was making arrangements for my rut when I told her what happened at my last house. Stars, I was scared. I hadn't thought of sex since that place, but my rut was coming, whether I liked it or not,
he explains, stuttering in a way that I don't commonly associate with Ande. I try not to think of what he's told me of his last mistress, the botched breeding that led to his sale. What happened? I hear myself ask.
She didn't force me. I told her the issues I've been having, the fear surrounding the acts, and, well, she found a way to placate the energies.
Ande's face is so red that I'm surprised there's blood left anywhere else in his body. I want to ask, but he's had enough trouble stammering through the end of that sentence that he might just malfunction if I force him to continue. I just place the last of the pastry in his mouth as he looks anywhere but my direction.
Have you spent a heat with your master?
He asks quietly. The question brings a blush to my face, but the innocent curiosity is hard to be mad at. He's already shared with me. It would be rude to ignore the question. No, I've had a spell on me most of my life suppressing it, I answer honestly, trying to avoid the bizarre impulse to apologize for my answer. Sorry, you had some fun and freaky times with your mistress. Still mostly a dry well over here, pal.
That can't be healthy,
he says with a frown, and suddenly he's got a whole lot more of my attention. It's not? I ask, the worry creeping into my voice more than I'd like.
Well, I don't think it is, but I don't know much about heats,
he admits, and I have to will myself to let go of the fragmented anxiety that's starting to take over my heart. It's fine. He doesn't even know anything about heats. It could be fine. I'm sure they would have said something if there were any complications from putting off my heats so long. Though I'm not entirely sure that's true. They didn't even tell me when they were suppressing my heats, just a quick spell twice a year that nobody explained to me. Would they even have cared if it fucked up my body? If it had long-term effects on my body? Master hasn't redone the spell. Is it strange to be scared? I say in a rush. I'm not sure I meant to ask the question, but before I have the chance to think it through, it's already come out of me, and there's nothing I can do but wait for Ande to say something.
No, it's your body doing something that you can't entirely control. It's normal to be afraid,
he answers before going silent for a moment, brow furrowed in thought.
Do you... Oh, well, I guess you wouldn't,
he murmurs to himself, and I can't help the flash of indignation. You're thinking something. I'd like to know what it is. It's my body. You should tell me. What? I ask, hoping the irritation in my voice isn't as evident as I think it is.
I was going to ask if you knew when it would come, but you've never had one before, so you probably don't know much about your own body cycle,
he says with a shrug. Won't it just come once the spell wears off? I have a week at most. I'm not sure I remember exactly when they did the last one. I try not to hear the childish pouting in my voice.
That's not how it works. It's all hormones, so your body will need time to get back to its natural production rate, and then you will start your cycles based on that,
he explains, and I nod along like I understand what he's saying. He snuggles back into the makeshift pillow, and I try my damnedest to turn my attention back to my workbook. But it seems as though the universe just doesn't have diligent makeup work in the cards today. Excuse me? The voice is too timid and polite to be some other student or the nice Coati who runs the front desk. When I look up, I'm fairly surprised to find that the voice belongs to a Viper familiar. She's probably a little on the small side for her kind, but the scales down the side of her face are easy to identify, even though the rest of her body is obscured in her ridiculously puffy winter clothes. Then again, she probably does have a harder time retaining and producing body heat. Winter must be an exceptionally horrible time. Hello. I try to greet her politely. I'm sorry, did you need something? My miss... she hisses. She's stuttering so badly that I can't understand a word she's trying to say. Please, come in. You don't have to be scared. It's just the two of us in here. I try to smile disarmingly, but she doesn't seem too affected by it. At least she moves away from where she's standing in the door. I'm sorry to bother you, but my mistress, she wanted me to find you," she finishes, bringing her eyes to the floor. It takes me a second to realize that she's waiting for my reply, though even when I realize it, I still don't know exactly what she's talking about. I've never seen her before. What could her mistress want with me? "Me?" I ask, just trying to make sure, but she starts violently. Immediately she pulls in on herself, raising her eyes to assess me, then the curled form of Ande in the corner, before shifting back to me. You are Blue, right?" she asks hastily. "I am," I confirm, wanting her to stop wringing her hands before she accidentally pulls them off in her fervor. "She said to find you and see if you would show me your master's trick," she explains. Now that makes sense. She wants me to help you learn how to cast the way my master trained me, I correct, embellishing the truth because if this word spreads, it might help our case. It's not some trick, it's just a different way of doing things. "Yes." Her S's roll on her overly long, forked tongue. "Well," I pretend to think it over, running a quick calculation in my head. "My master isn't here. That's the only way we'd get away with it. My master's technique is something that he learned from an ancient source, and I'm sure he wouldn't appreciate me just giving out the results of his hard work. But I think I can make an exception. You just can't tell anyone that you got it from me, or I'll be in trouble." I have to fight myself not to smile and give it away, but she takes in my story with wide eyes, and I can tell she believes it. Why wouldn't she? I have no reason to deceive her. Besides, people like stories. The more fun it is to tell, the faster it spreads. No, I don't want to get you in trouble. Don't worry, my mistress told me that no one could know she was sending me to get help from another person's familiar. I think your secret's safe." She nods quickly, as if agreeing with her own statement. I thank my lucky stars for the poker face that I've had a lifetime to develop, else I might have sneered in her face. Yeah, her mistress doesn't want it getting around that she not only had to ask for help, but she had to seek that help out in another mage's familiar. I get why she wouldn't want that getting out. It would be social death. I try not to let it sting. It's working out in our favor. "All right then, let's start again,"